Welcome back, everyone, from the Draft Premier League. I am here for week number 2, the recaps for the games for the Nature's Madmen, going up against the Legion of Boom. After last week's heartbreaking loss to Blades versus Goliath, the Madmen are looking to bounce back here against the Legion of Boom. Or I guess the Legion of Rillaboom, as they with their Pokemon puns, but yeah, hoping to see a good bounce back here. Taking some feedback from last week, I'm going to change how I narrate a lot of the games and try not to spoil what happens ahead of time. So yeah, why don't we just hop right into game number 1. Alright, we're here for game number 1. We have Blitz versus Slick. Obviously, Blitz will be on the side that we see from the back, but not a surprising set of brings from Slick's side. He benched Skuntank and Electabuzz, not really surprised there. The matchup is pretty straightforward for Blitz, where the Zeraora has a pretty strong presence and speed tier here. Make good use of Eject Pack to close combat here to kind of work around any type of lead, whether it be Steelix or Weavile in this case, ended up being. And surprisingly, Slick, for some reason, makes a rather aggressive play and sacks the Azumarill right there, which is probably one of the more bigger threats and sweeper threats in the matchup outside of potentially Mew. But he let it die to Plasma Fist. But, you know, the Madmen will take those, and we're definitely not going to be complaining. But yeah, the Alolan Persian is a Pokemon that looks absolutely incredible here as well. Once again, because of that speed tier here, is pretty favorable, as the only thing that really outspeeds it is the Weavile and the Scarfer, and any potential Scarfers, which it looks like the Galarian Zapdos is Choice Scarfed. But then Blitz absolutely fumbles here and clicks Trick Room instead of Teleport with Slowking for some reason, and it makes this endgame all the more perilous around Mew, despite how strong his start was. But yeah, the main emphasis in this game was really to kind of just secure chip on Steelix, scat out the Scarfers, which it was the Galarian Zapdos, if any, and it was, and then the Celesteal or Volcarona can clean up any type of endgame here. But because of the Trick Room, he kind of had to sack off things, and it made it a little bit scary here at the end. Luckily, he got in a position where he forced the Zapdos to lock close combat, got Volcarona in to click Quiver Dance, and obviously the Zapdos wins the speed tie here, but it will not be enough to knock out both the Volcarona and the Celesteela from where it's at, and Blitz is able to take a narrow 1-0 victory here to start off the series for the Madmen 1-0. But yeah, strong start, has enough sacks to basically work around the Zapdos and secures the dub. So why don't we move on to game number 2. So we're here for game number 2, Lucas versus Amel. To start this off, the Terra Captain for Amel is Terra Electric Rotom Wash, and the Terra Captains for Lucas are Terra Grass Donphan and Terra Dragon Latios. Now, this game already starts off a bit rough for Lucas, as Coach Habita told him that Crabominable was not a real threat, and bringing it is kind of a throw. So there was a lack of real practice against the Crab guy. So let's see if Lucas is actually able to work around that, and hopefully it's not going to bite him in the ass. But the game starts off with securing crucial toxics on Amel's end on things like Alomomola and Weavile from the Pecharunt. And Lucas is actually able to secure some lasting damage on the Scizor, who stands as one of the two main roadblocks for Latios in this game, the other one being the Hatterene, obviously, because it is a Terra Dragon Latios. And as you can see, he's kind of just doing some pivoting here, kind of working around all the threats. Pecharunt absolutely eats the shit out of that Earthquake. The Alomomola comes back in, is going to be able to click Flip Turn on the Pecharunt and get in the Latios, which is kind of the main engine here, just the Spadef Alomomola facilitating the Latios. Latios slowly trying to chip down things like Scizor and Hatterene, the only two real switch-ins to Latios in this matchup. But yeah, eventually the Crabominable comes in and it clicks Substitute, and it's gonna start having a field day versus the passive output of this Alomomola. And with Iron Fist, it's going to be able to click Ice Hammer and Drain Punch, and I believe it gets, I'm not sure if it gets Mach Punch or not, but it's going to be able to click any one of those moves to secure chip damage here. But yeah, he just continues to punish the Alomomola. The Scizor is basically forced to kill itself to the Garchomp, and yeah, I mean, at this point, it really still is the Latios versus the world. The Scizor comes in, it's at really low health. The Hatterene comes in again, and at this point, he's going to be able to Trick Room, hard, get in Crabominable again, and once again, Crabominable is here for round number 2. You can click Substitute versus the Alomomola, and there isn't a whole lot that Lucas can do outside of just, again, pivot around, work around this Crabominable, and once again, Habita's advice of saying this Mon is not going to come, and that it's potentially a liability in the matchup. Kind of eating his words a little bit there, but yeah, once again, Garchomp knocking out another Pokemon with Rough Skin, Scizor and Weavile this time, and at this point, Latios is able to secure the Scizor sack, and it does opt to stand versus Hatterene, expecting another Trick Room to come up here as it had done the past 2 times. And it clicks Healing Wish. So the only 2 roadblocks, Scizor and Hatterene, are both gone for Latios. So if he's able to survive this Crabominable onslaught for the 3rd time in this game, he might be able to potentially win this with Latios. But yeah, he works around, trying to pivot around the Crabominable here, and expecting potentially maybe a flip turn to break the sub. He clicks Substitute again, but he has a Luring Voice, which goes past the Substitute, and he's able to click flip turn here, but Amel makes the good read, expecting the swap and covering for it, and just clicking Ice Hammer as the Alomomola really was not a threat. And here, Latios comes in, clicks Shadow Ball versus the Pecharunt. I believe Terra Dragon Dragon Pulse is actually stronger than Shadow Ball, but I assume maybe he was trying to go for like a Spadaf drop potentially versus Pecharunt. But unfortunately, he does hit himself in confusion on the 1 turn he needed to break through to hit the Pecharunt, and now he's going to have to try and reset here, Healing Wish the Latios, and he decides to go for Calm Mind here to kind of cover for the Toxic, as he's going to need the boost at some point to power through, but he opts to go for a Parting Shot here and go into a Scarf Rotom Wash that does not click Trick, which would have potentially won him the game, as he would have been able to trick the Latios into Toxic, or like recover into Toxic with the Pecharunt, and it would have either been -1 Latios or a neutral Latios, which he would have been able to take on pretty well at this point in time. But yeah, the Latios is able to abuse the Rotom that's locked into Thunderbolt. I don't know if it was Timer that got to Amel's head, but it seemed like a pretty clear end game on his part, and he kind of fumbled the bag here, left the Latios set up. Even got paralyzed here, so he can't even Toxic it with Pecharunt, and the game is over. Lucas is able to take the dub and knock out the Pecharunt, and the Madmen are now 2-0 in this series. And yeah, I mean, it looked like Amel had a lot of control in that game with Crabominable, and somehow Latios found a way to win the game. And if it weren't for the confusion on that 1 turn, Latios would have been able to win this game a lot sooner. But yeah, Lucas pulls it out. Let's move on to game number 3. All right, we're here for game number 3. Vesta's Terra Captain is Terra Water Ogerpon, and Habita's is Terra Dark Tornadus T and Terra Grass Carbink. But as you can see, both Terra Captains decide to Terra here on the first turn. And the first turn revealed a max defense Ogerpon that ends up critical hit one-shotting Torn off lead. This immediately sets Habita back from the jump. But the game is still winnable despite the awful start. Vest stayed in with Roaring Moon versus the Baxcalibur, which kind of screams that he was pretty confident that he will outspeed, which means that he's probably Choice Scarf. But we'll see here later in the game, after this Treads exchange with Jirachi, he's able to live the Aura Sphere and knock out the Jirachi here. But you'll see that this Booster Treads actually outspeeds the Roaring Moon. So it's confusing whether or not it's Scarfed or not, or he just made a read that Vax wasn't Scarfed. And this kind of sets up Habita for the rest of the game for his decision that it's potentially not a Scarf Roaring Moon because of that Treads exchange. But Ursaluna threatening here. is able to do massive amount of damage, but Bax comes in, and if it isn't Scarf Roaring Moon, Bax just wins the game with double Outrage, but it is Scarf Roaring Moon, and it does knock out the Baxcalibur, and Habita loses the game, and forfeits out, basically. There was probably a potential win path to work around that if he decided to, he went Carbink, he could have went into Rotom and killed the Ursaluna there, and then worked around and tried to use Carbink, but I think he was afraid of a Calm Mind Raging Bolt outpacing his Carbink and winning the game that way, and regardless, he would have lost to the, with Bax, unless he had Ice Shard potentially and the Raging Bolt was low enough. But yeah, pretty quick game compared to the last one, which was pretty long, but yeah, Roaring Moon clutches us out. The Legion of Boom are able to secure a game here, and yeah, we move on to game number 4. All right, here for game number 4, we have Bacon versus Toxic. Toxic's Terra Captain is Terra Fairy Gambit, and Bacon's captains are Terra Fairy Thundurus T and Rotom Wash, both. And the game starts with a simple defensive Stealth Rocks exchange. However, it quickly moves into a pretty hard-hitting offense, and you'll see here with a Choice Banded Great Tusk, which it looks like a pretty bulky Azelf to be able to take that hit, but you'll see a pretty cute sequence here with Eject Button, Pickpocket Tinkaton that ends up stealing the Choice Scarf off of the Azelf, effectively reducing the speed counterplay for Meowscarada to be non-existent at the present moment. As it looks, if that was the Scarfer, it looks like there's nothing else that outspeeds the Meowscarada unless there's another Scarf somewhere on the team. But yeah, Tinkaton is able to get some chip damage on Cinderace here, and he goes into Tusk with a Reflect Up, but a massive crit here with the end of the Reflect turn here, and he's forced to swap out. And that chip damage is going to be pretty massive against the Tusk, as it would have been at a much higher HP, and he could have pressured the Cinderace with a Rapid Spin there. Yeah, but then finally Thundurus comes in, able to finally get a Terra off. We see that it does take Stealth Rocks damage, so it looks like it potentially has some other type of item, could be a potential choiced item in this case, but is able to knock out the Raging Bolt in one hit. This Ursaring unfortunately fails to knock out the Rotom for Toxic, and that allows Rotom to get a nice big Foul Play chip damage off on it. And despite the crit, Tusk is still out of range of the Facade with Reflect Up and is able to get a spin off on Tusk, and Toxic returns the favor with his own Rapid Spin, opting to not stay in, expecting maybe a Shuka Berry Dragalge. King Gambit is able to get chip damage here, and yeah, he finally gets the Thundurus back in, and I believe he actually makes a misplay here, and he clicks Sludge Bomb versus King Gambit instead of clicking Terra Blast Fairy. As you can see right here, the Great Tusk ends up going for Head Smash versus Dragalge, and fails to knock it out. Dragalge crits it back, and this game is basically won with Meowscarada, as again, that Choice Scarf on Azelf was stolen, and there's nothing else left here to take it on. But yeah, the reason I said that was a potential misplay is that positionally, he wanted to be able to get chip on the Gambit, but he didn't need to actually kill it, because by clicking Sludge Bomb, he allowed the Great Tusk to come in and click Rapid Spin, and it could have just won the game if it had a ground move, or if it landed the Head Smash. So a bit fortunate there. He he got let his position go, and he was able to get rewarded with a miss and allow him to win the game. But yeah, if he had locked into Terra Blast, it probably would not have knocked out the Gambit, but it put it low enough that he would have been able to go into Meowscarada and just spam Flower Trick or Triple Axle to win the game, assuming it was like a Rindo Berry on the Great Tusk. But yeah, definitely not the prettiest end game, but this week seems to be full of major game-changing moments in the final turns of the game, as we saw with that Amel game, and yeah, especially with the game one as well with Blitz and Slick. Blitz obviously clicking that Trick Room made it a little dicier for himself in the final parts of the game, but despite all that, the Madmen are now 3-1 in the first 4 games. And let's move on to game number 5. We're here for game number 5. We have Nick versus Itzia. This game starts with a little bit of a Slowbro mirror action, but the Slowbro does not appear to be max defense based off the U-turn damage from the Landers. And this game quickly kind of starts to devolve and becomes the Azelf and Landorus show. They just spam momentum moves with each other, and then eventually he gets the Azelf in versus Slowbro and is able to click Thunderbolt to massively almost kill the Crobat, and then he clicks Flamethrower as he goes hard Steelix and is able to get a ton of secure chip damage on that as well. And yeah, at this point, Nick actually ends up going for an overread here with Stun Spore. Luckily, he gets rewarded with a para and doesn't get punished there. But a bit unfortunate for Itzia there as well. But the Slowbro is dead. Both Slowbros are actually dead at this point. Machamp is able to get in. It's actually like one of the only things that's actually able to put off enough offensive pressure versus this team. The Lotties kind of have to slowly take down this Diancie, but they ran a really fast Steelix, so maybe instead of not rocks there, they could have attacked it, but they probably expect the Diancie to switch into potentially Landorus, and they just wanted to get rocks up to help the Latios and the Machamp later on. But again, Azelf had done so much damage to weaken his Steelix and his Crobat. It's also just going to be able to U-turn on Silvally Dark. They had to bring Silvally Dark because of the Blacephalon that was benched, and at this point, Diancie is going to be able to live the Surf from the Latios, click Play Rough and knock it out. And no matter what this Silvally does, the Momental is going to be able to come in, and then the Landorus will be able to come in and secure the game, as Machamp is not fast enough to take out both Azelf and Landorus. Pretty comfortable win for Nick. He basically was able to win the sack game because he had enough pieces after kind of denting down Itzia's defensive core between Slowbro, Steelix, and even the speed and Crobat. So he really had nothing fast to revenge both the Landorus, which did lose its Scarf, which it didn't really need at that point, and the Azelf, which outsped the Latios, which was the next fastest thing. But great bounce back for Nick after his Game 8 heartbreaking loss last week to Zazo. But yeah, the Madmen have secured a tie for the week after only just 5 games. They're up 4 games to 1. One more win out of the next 3 games will guarantee 2 points and the win for the week. So going into Game 6, let's see if the Madmen can keep up this winning momentum. All right, we're here for Game 6, Rye versus Chipboard. So off the bat, a taunt lead Azelf versus Skarmory kind of ruins Rye's lead plan, so he kind of has to go hard into Nidoqueen. And unfortunately for him right here, the Sucker Punch does not knock out the Azelf as it gets crucial chip damage on Nidoqueen with an explosion. The Nidoqueen could have been at full HP, which would have been really useful in the end game, potentially versus something like a Togekiss or even maybe like a Heatran or Mega Scizor. But now it's at like 29%, so not going to really do a whole lot. But Chipboard kind of is able to let the Skarmory come back in and click rocks. It's a fast Skarmory that's able to stop the bulk up Diggersby. But at this point, Skarmory is going to be able to get up rocks and spikes. I believe the spikes are glitched on the screen. You can't actually see them, but they're there. But yeah, then Rye has a great position to basically checkmate the game, where he can click U-turn versus the Heatran and then sack this Nidoqueen to scout what it locked into, since it is a Scarf Heatran that clicked Earth Power versus a Skarmory and had to swap out. But unfortunately, Rye clicks Close Combat and allows this Togekiss to come into either one, defog the hazards away, or set up. And the latter happened. It does set up, and at this point, Rye is basically forced to sack both of his Wincon Mew and Lantern, and can't do a whole lot here, as the priority is just going to be overwhelming here in the end game between the Diggersby and the, as you can see, the Aqua Jet Keldeo knocks out the Infernape. Now, going back to the previous turns, there was like a weird exchange with Trevenant versus Mega Scizor, where Rai decided not to click Will-O-Wisp versus it, expecting Heatran to come in, and decided to go for Earthquake. Mega Scizor decided to stay in anyways and click Pursuit, and that basically allowed Chipboard to have more free reign with Keldeo, as there would be no real Keldeo check outside of maybe like a Mew, but if it's like an offensive Mew, it's not going to be able to switch into Keldeo. But yeah, Chip's overprediction with Scarf Heatran basically allowed Rai to get his hazards up, which got him back into the game and got him into that position where all he had to do was click U-turn with Infernape. If Heatran locked itself into Earth Power or Flamethrower, vice versa, whatever, versus the Nidoqueen sack, if it was Flamethrower, he could have went into Agility Lantern setup, either won the game or chipped things down to the point that Mew would have won or Infernape would have won. And then if he locked into Earth Power, he could have went Mew setup, did the same thing, and then potentially set up for Lantern. Unfortunately, Rai does succumb to that priority endgame due to the poor positioning off of Infernape, and he lost the game. So it's still 4-2. There's still 2 games left to get that final win to secure 2 points for the week. So why don't we just head right into game number 7. All right, we have game number 7, Joshua versus Undead. So Undead's Terra Captain is Terra Dark King Gambit, and Joshua's Captain is Terra Fairy Raging Bolt. So Joshua leads with Duraludon, is able to get up his rocks, and then somehow outspeeds a banded Quaquaval here that clicks U-turn off of a Draco Eject Pack Duraludon and basically knocks out the Quaquaval by turn 2. And then Undead is actually using Terra Dark Terra Blast on his King Gambit as kind of an effective way to get around potential Rocky Helmet chip, which is a pretty neat thing to see, and I've seen it before as well. But this Duraludon decides to put in massive overtime. Not only did it get up rocks, it's starting to roar and get secured chip damage on things like Abomasnow and gets in this Rhyperior. He clicks Draco Meteor instead of wanting to click Flash Cannon versus this Rhyperior, not trying to accidentally activate some like weakness policy if it's like Rock Polish. So good foresight there on Joshua's part. But yeah, that Duraludon put in absolute massive work. It got a complete nut off, basically, as I said. But yeah, this Treads comes in, kind of basically forces out the Abomasnow, but Gambit decides to click the Sucker Punch and actually take big Rocky Helmet chip there, which is pretty nice. But based off how the mocks were going with Joshua, Raging Bolt had an elite matchup going into this game. So once it got in, it clicked Calm Mind, it got a sub up, and the game was basically over. Even with a Custat Berry, this Blizzard was not breaking at +2. And Raging Bolt is basically going to win the game, unless this Rhyperior can live, and it does. But it doesn't have Roar, and it doesn't click it. So it does click, has a Custat Endeavor set here, which is pretty cool. But Joshua clicks Protect to scout for that type of shenanigan. And yeah, a Sub-Protect, Calm Mind, Terra Blast, Raging Bolt is going to be able to win the game very convincingly against Undead, who forfeits the game on turn 23. So with this Game 7 win, the Madmen have won Week 2 against the Legion of Boom. They're currently up 5-2 with 1 game left. So it's a massive bounce back from last week's Heartbreaker against the Doublades. But now, moving on to the final game, let's see if the Madmen can secure some much-needed differential moving into Week 3 to allow them to climb up in the standings. And it'll be good for potential tie breaks later on if need be, going for a playoff run. So yeah, why don't we head right into game number 8. So we're here for game number 8. We have Sky Penguin versus Bobbert. Like I said in the previous game, the series is already over. The Madmen have secured 2 points for the week and the win. And this is basically just finishing out for either a strong finish and for differential. But going into this game, I actually gave my once per week mock to Sky 10 minutes before his game here. And I just kind of recycled someone's mock and made some edits that I've felt were useful in the matchup and that he might want to test against. It was a pretty one-sided affair against him, and I was afraid that it was actually going to demoralize him going into this match, and so that's where we left off going into this game. So yeah, he leads with his Charizard X, which is his dedicated lead, and in classic Will-O-Wisp fashion, he missed on turn 1, which he had done in every single mock, including the one that I just gave him like a few minutes before this. Regardless, the Metagross doesn't have a real way to punish Zard, no Toxic or anything. So he's able to set up a Dragon Dance. Rotom Wash is faster after the T-Wave and is able to Volt Switch out. But he has to basically sack something through the Flare Blitz. He decides to go Landorus, but unfortunately the Zard gets paralyzed, which is really bad for Sky. And it was really risky on Bobbert's part, because if it was like a offensive Landorus, Flare Blitz chip would have been massive versus that, and it would have been really nice for Kartana and Coco in the endgame. I thought, if anything, he would have sacked the Metagross on that turn, given that the Rotom was actually faster than Zard. But unfortunately, Sky's able to kind of shrug off the horrible first 5 turns, and is able to kind of get up his rocks and secure nice chip damage between his Steelix, his Mesprit, and his Alolan Muck. And the Conkeldurr comes in, basically knocks out the Zard. He sacks it, deems it not really useful here in the end game. But Coco comes in and Volt Switches. He said that he misclicked. I'm not sure what he meant by that, but seemed fine to me to get Coco in. The Serp gets a crit here on the Alolan Muck. Doesn't really do a whole lot, so it should be fine. At least it forces out the Serperior. Sorry about that. And then this Rotom here doesn't seem to have Hydro Pump, or didn't want to click it. It only had Foul Play, it seemed. And so the Steelix was actually able to go for an Explosion here and knock out the Rotom, which is really big for Kartana potentially wanting to lock into Smart Strike. As you can see here, that's exactly what happens. And Bobber actually decides to scout if it's like a banded Kartana or potentially a Z Kartana that can knock out the Landorus. And we saw that it was Z-Fly and not Choice Scarf, but it is Rock Polish and it does have Hidden Power Fire. So it actually will win here with Earthquake, but Sky pulls out the Custap Berry Muck and is able to knock out the Landorus with an Ice Punch. It looked like Landorus was basically going to win the game with an Earthquake sweep, but instead the Muck is able to knock it out and 1v1 this Reflect Serperior, and that is basically the end of the game. Is able to knock it out, and Sky is able to secure the 6th win for the week, and your Madmen will finish the series with a massive bounce back dominant series W against the Legion of Boom. Yeah, it seems like a lot of these games were, I would like to say, they were not like the prettiest games. Some of them were very, very strong from the Madmen players, just off of like leads. I think Blitz had a really solid lead. The end game kind of got close at the end, and then Joshua had probably one of the most dominant games this week from the team. That was pretty solid. Rai was able to bounce back, but like a lot of these games, even from the opponent's side, I felt a lot of the games were kind of bottled. And then crucial moments of the battle, and the games were basically over after that. So here, just for some final thoughts, I'm super proud of the boys' resolve and the ability to bounce back after last week's loss. Getting the first win is always a big milestone for the season, and I cannot wait to see them grind it out and get the next one against Made in Heaven next week. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week, week number 3, against Made in Heaven for those game recaps. Peace.